Welcome back to the workshop. Today I'll be showing you how to make this simple, but highly effective, Nerf Crossbow blaster. Everything's really simple to come by. The bow's made from PVC, and the stock is made from pine. I built a few prototypes for this project that were a lot simpler, so I'll also be showing you how to tweak this if you have simple tools or don't want to build as complicated of a project. Alright, here's what I'm using for the bow. It's SDR 13.5 PVC pipe in a 1/2 inch size. Now you can use different PVC than I do, but you won't be able to follow the dimensions exactly. If you use thicker pipe, you'll have to use a longer bow so that it's more flexible. And if you use more flexible pipe, you'll have to make a shorter bow. After scraping away the ink, I'm cutting the pipe down to 12 inches in length. Next up, we're going to flatten the PVC, and we'll do this by heating it up with the heat gun until it plasticizes, and then we'll clamp it flat in a mold. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a stove or an open flame, or pretty much any other heat source. Just make sure you do this in a well-ventilated area, because PVC fumes can get toxic, especially if you burn the pipe. Definitely try not to, because if you burn it, the pipe will get a lot more brittle. It doesn't take long for the PVC to cool, just a few minutes. Once that's out, we can start to mark out the bow. I'm going for an asymmetric shape so that the string clearance is better on the top side of the crossbow rather than the bottom. That's going to give us better flight out of our Nerf darts without so much friction from the string. I'm putting the string grooves 1/2 of an inch away from the tips. I'm also making another mark 1.5 inches away from the tips, and that's where we'll recurve the bow later. Alright, that means we're ready to shape the bow and cut out the nocks. Okay, the bow's now all roughed out, and we're ready to add the recurves. Normally I don't like to add recurves to my bow making tutorials because they add a lot of unnecessary complexity, and they'll throw a few people off. But these are pretty trivially easy, and they don't make the project any harder. Now obviously you don't have to make a recurve. You can just make a simple straight stave bow, but adding the recurves will add a bit of stiffness to your bow, so if you choose not to do them, use a slightly shorter bow. Alright, that's it for the bow, that's all ready. Now let's move on to the string. I'm going to be making a continuous loop crossbow string. If you don't want to bother with the hassle, you can use a piece of paracord and thicken it with some duct tape. That's what I did for this early prototype version. Now normally for a crossbow string you'd want to use a very low stretch material, like hemp or linen, or actual bowstring material. Now for this build I'm just trying to show you that you can use household materials. This is just some cotton thread that I had lying around the house. There's nothing special about it, and I'm going to wind it around 2 nails until I build it up to almost the thickness of a Nerf dart. By the way, I have the nails 11 inches apart. About 1 inch less than the length of the bow works out just right. Really, the only thing about this crossbow that makes it a Nerf crossbow is that the string has to be a lot thicker in the center to match the diameter of a Nerf dart. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a normal crossbow. After tying off the bundle, we're going to swivel the knot around so it lies around the middle of the string. We're going to wrap up the center sections before we move them back to their original positions so that these will later make up the string loops. You'll see what I mean in a minute. I cut about 10 feet of the cotton twine for serving, and I passed it through some beeswax to help it stick. If you don't serve the loops of the string, the crossbow will still work. The serving just helps to keep the loops nice and tidy and authentic looking. Now, when it comes to the middle of the string, you really do have to serve it, or do anything you can to thicken the string. If the string is too much thinner than a Nerf dart, then you'll get an erratic contact between the string and the dart, and sometimes the string will pass under or over, and you'll get erratic flight. If you want nice arrow flight, the string has to be almost the size of the Nerf dart. Okay, now we have the string loops in position and served. I'm going to add more serving now down the whole length of the string. Now you only have to serve the center of the string to increase the diameter, and the base of the loops to tie them off. I'm just going to go ahead and serve the whole string anyway, just to keep it tidy looking. Almost done. I'm just going to do one more pass of serving through the center, just to thicken it up a little bit more. Alright, there it is. Let's slip on the string, and now we have a working bow. That means we're ready to start working on the stock. You really don't need any special wood for this project. I'm just using pine. There's a lot of personal freedom in how you set up the stock. Mostly it doesn't matter, and it's just going to depend on your preferences and what tools you want to use. Now I'm going to mount the bow 2 inches from the end of the stock at an angle to help with the string clearance. Since the bow has a 6-inch draw length, we're going to put the shoulder for the trigger 6 inches behind that, or 8 inches total from the end of the stock. So just keep in mind that the dimensions of the stock are flexible, depending on the stance of your bow. Don't copy my dimensions too blindly because they might not apply to your bow. Okay, now I'm working on the bolt deck, where the Nerf dart's going to slide across. For now, I'm just going to flatten it, but later we actually want it to run at a very slight downward curve, and that's going to keep the friction down on the string and the dart as it slides across. Do you have to use a draw knife to do all this carving? Obviously not. I'm assuming if you're watching this tutorial, you already have a way to shape wood that you like, so just do that. I'm using draw knives because as a bowyer they're my favorite tool, and I really enjoy using them. No one really cares what tools you use, so stick to what you like and try to enjoy the project. If you want to see more of my draw knives, check out my most recent video where I show off my collection and how I sharpen them. And if you'd like to learn how to use one, check out my video on beginner carving tips. I'm using a spoke shave to clean things up, but you don't have to get anything perfect for now. Later on we'll put the finishing touches on the bolt deck and get it sloping just slightly downwards. Okay, now I'm going to make the slot that the bow fits into. I'm going to be drilling out the cavity, but if you don't want to do that, you can just saw it out the bottom, like I did in this prototype. Drilling it out from the center and then filing out the cavity makes for a slightly stronger hole though. The fit has to be slightly loose so that you can get the bow in, but later on we'll wedge in some leather to close up that gap. Cut the shoulder for the trigger deep enough to hold the string. That's something you might have to tweak later on, as you test the crossbow. Next, we're drilling the hole for the trigger pin. Try to stay right up against the shoulder as much as you can. Make sure that the drill bit's at least the diameter of your string, ideally larger. This next hole is for the axle for the trigger. I'm going to be carving out a channel for the trigger to fit into, but that's not something you have to do. Check out my prototype crossbow and the skein crossbow from history for much simpler trigger designs. You basically just have to figure out how to make a hinge. There's 1,000 ways to do it. Once you start to expose the hole for the trigger axle, you just need to go a little bit further to give the trigger some clearance. Alright, the channel is all done. Now let's make a trigger that fits inside. Okay, that's the trigger. Now we just need to align the trigger and the trigger pin. I'm just going to give the pin a little whack into the trigger to leave us a nice mark. Now we can trim away any excess to the trigger pin, so that when you close the trigger, it sits flush with the top of the bolt deck. Next up, let's carve the groove that holds the Nerf dart. Make it slightly larger in diameter than the Nerf dart itself. Notice that the bolt deck curves down slightly to reduce friction. I also let the groove flare a bit at the tip for the same reason. Also make sure to round off the corners of the shoulder so that the string doesn't snag and wear down. Here's the very last thing we have to make. It's a bolt clip to hold down the Nerf darts, and I made it out of a scrap piece of the same PVC. Make sure that the clip holds the dart snugly, yet doesn't crumple it at all. We are finally ready for the final shaping. Knock yourself out and get creative. This is where you can add a personal touch to your project. To finish the stalk, I'll be sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper, and then I'll raise the grain with some alcohol and sand with 320 grit. Finally, I'll stain the bow with some gel antique and coat it with a few layers of shellac. I ended up coloring the bow with Sharpie, which does make it look a bit like horn. That wasn't my original intention. I tried to do some designs on the back and they looked pretty awful. And then I got carried away trying to cover them up. PVC is notoriously hard to get finishes to stick to. If you want something nice, my recommendation is to buy a solid, colored piece of PVC pipe. The Sharpie does come off very easily, but on the bright side, when it does come off, it is very easy to patch up. And now all we need is a couple layers of shellac, a little bit of glue, and a leather shim so the bow fits tightly. Alright folks, that is all for today. I really hope you enjoyed this build, and share it with some friends and family who might enjoy it too. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, may the bow gods be with you, and may your Nerf darts fly true.
Good boy! Come, something.